Hey y'all, in this tutorial we'll be going over how to do this alpine stitch. It's one I saw around quite a bit and I've absolutely loved it, and it has taken me forever to actually sit down and pick a project to work with it. It was surprisingly easy, so I would say this is definitely for a beginner when you're starting to get into those more intricate stitch techniques, but it works just as well for anyone, and it makes a delightful blanket. In this tutorial, we'll be using this, Wool Ease from Lions brand, and it is in the color of Fossil. Okay, if you say so. But it kind of has a cool little transition between tans to blues to kind of brownish golds to whites. It is a bulky 6. I am currently working on a baby blanket making this, and let me tell you, as nice and kind of soft and interesting as this is, you're going to need a lot of yarn. I think my baby blanket is going to end up being like 4 of these, and it's for a car seat, not even a whole baby blanket. But that aside, I'll be using a 10mm crochet hook, and I will very quickly with y'all run through how we go ahead and do this alpine stitch. Alright, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to make a slip stitch and I'm going to chain 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Like many crochet stitches, we're going to go ahead and add one more to turn, and our next row is going to be single crochets. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just go through this top loop right here and complete this whole row. For the alpine stitch, you're working in sets of 2, which means that your row count, whatever it is, needs to be an even number. And that would be the row count before the turning chain. So in this case, we're doing 10 for a blanket. I have one I'm working on right now, has 50 stitches in each row. It's a car seat sized blanket, not to be confused with a slightly larger baby blanket. But either way, I chained 50 plus 1 and turned. So I completed this row of single crochet. We'll go ahead and get started with the double crochets. And I'm going to come over, chain 2, come over here, and I'm going to go into this very first stitch right here. So I'll yarn over, come in, and in this row, which would be our third row, we're going to go ahead and just add our double crochets all the way across. And then from there, we will get into the portion of the pattern that makes this the alpine stitch. But to start, you have your chain, a row of single crochets, and a row of double crochets. I'll make sure to go through that very last one. And that completes our row of double. Alright, so we went ahead and did double crochets all the way across. One thing I forgot to mention, when doing these double crochets, since we have this post that builds up, this can be confused with being the first stitch. So it helps to add a stitch marker if you're not used to seeing it, so that you know this is going to be our first stitch, and then we should have 10 in the row. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Whenever we do a row of double crochets, we're going to come back and do a row of single crochets. This is going to force our pattern to stay on one side so that we don't have our front posts building up on each side and kind of taken away from the alternating pattern we're working towards. Oop. And then we'll go ahead and go through that very last one. And a lot of times you can go right over the safety pin or pull it out, however you want to do it. But we're now going to start the portion that makes this a double crochet. So we'll chain 2, come back to the front. For this very first one, instead of going into the very first stitch right here, we're going to go behind this post below and come up. So what we'll do is yarn over, go behind the post, and notice this stitch right here, we're going under it. So we're coming to the very bottom of this post, yarning over and pulling through, and then you can pull back up, yarn over, go through 2, and complete the double crochet by finishing it off. So that will be our front post double crochet. The next one, bless me, will be going through this stitch. The best way to distinguish which stitch you're going through, because it kind of, for this double crochet post, you kind of have 2 different stitches. You're going to the one to the right of the post. So yarn over again, and come up. And that's going to be our alternating pattern. So after this, we're going to yarn over, we're going to skip this post, and we're going to go through this, through towards the bottom in the larger of the gaps. And then we will complete our stitch and continue on. With this one, we'll yarn over. And again, if you see this post, we have these 2 stitches. We're going through the stitch on the right. I don't know if that's coming through the video, but that's my garage door, and bless my husband for opening and closing it. Hopefully it wasn't as loud and annoying as I think it might be, but we'll find out shortly. And right now I'm just finishing off this row, and we will get to, after of course our single crochets, we'll go over the next change in the pattern. And I'm going every other one. So this one, I'll be going through this crochet stitch right here. And at the end, I will go through this post. And finally, in my very last stitch, which I have this kind of crossbar and this stitch, I will go through the stitch with a double crochet. And I'll pull more of this yarn off because I didn't do that ahead of time. And it's getting obnoxious. So that is going to be the first row of our alpine stitch. The next row we do will be, after the single crochet of course, we're going to be alternating where we start to create the pattern. So we will very quickly run back through here. Boop, boop, boop. And you kind of notice that this back is not looking the same as the front. Because of that difference in appearance, we always want to make sure we have a row of single crochets and we keep the same appearance on each side. So we'll chain 2 and come back around. So in that first row, we went right in and pulled up and went through the post of our first double crochet. And this one we want to alternate. So we would yarn over, go into that very first stitch right at the top, and complete our double crochet. Now, instead of going through this next stitch, we're going to come and get this kind of post that looks like it's behind. Again, we'll go through the larger gaps, yarn over again, and complete it. And that is going to be our pattern. So everything else is going to be the same. With each of these double crochet rows, you're alternating where you start. And that's going to be right in the beginning. So we're either starting in the very first stitch and going over that very first post, or we're going through our top stitch. And we'll just run through this one so I can see here. This is my top post, so I'm going through the top stitch and not the post. And when I come to the next one, this looks like it's behind, so I'm going to come through the back. I wouldn't call it a back post, but go through what looks like the back double crochet stitch, go through the top, then we will loop through and grab this back post. And finally, with this last one, or these last two stitches, we're going to yarn over, go through this stitch. And then for this last one, because we're on the very edge, we're going to yarn over, wrap over through this, so we still have our post, and we're going to complete our double crochet. And we'll single and run through this row, and then just demonstrate how we would go into the next row. But that's pretty much going to be the whole pattern. It's just alternating between technically the 4 rows, but you're alternating between your 2 double crochet rows. Ooh. And it gets a little bunched, but that is all right. All right, so we've finished our single crochet on the back here. We're going to chain 2. And now in the last one, we had gone through the top post. So you can kind of see in this pattern, instead of having the very first one is pushed up like down here, it's moved over one. That is going to indicate to us that we would once again come down here, go between this very kind of edge chain and this first post, and pull that up. And then continue on. So where we can see that this is kind of pushed ahead, we will be going through the top chain. And we just keep going. So again, that's the whole stitch. It's just a rotation. Without finishing this whole row, you can kind of start to see how this is going to kind of zigzag back and forth as you go up. And that's how you'll know to kind of check with each of your rows. Aside from doing a stitch count, because sometimes it's easy to lose the stitch count in this since you're kind of jumping back and forth. But additionally, to keep that pattern up, you're able to see based off of these. But that is the Alpine stitch.